What I'm going to do as the director of Lapido Media is give you some stories, some case studies, some scenarios which kind of bed in the sorts of things that John has been so eloquently and professionally telling you. I'm going to speak for about 3 or 4 minutes to introduce the film which we've made, which really reflects the growing groundswell of opinion from across the globe, demanding that the West get religion. The voices that you're going to hear in the film articulate a sense confirmed by recent research by the Pew Research Center in the US that indicates that the secular West and the rest of the world are in fact engaged in a dialogue of the deaf when they do engage at all in any serious way. They're bypassing each other. Pew concludes with the following: with growing conflicts engulfing the Middle East, people in the region name religious and ethnic hatred most frequently as the greatest threat to the world. Moreover, publics across the globe see the threat of religious and ethnic violence as a growing threat to the world's future. But in Europe, concerns about inequality trump all other dangers. And the gap between the rich and the poor is increasingly considered the world's top problem by people living in advanced economies, including the US. In other words, the majority world is deeply religious. That small bit of it that still dominates the world's agenda, the secular West, is deeply unaware, I suggest, of what really drives the rest. And I received my first intimation of this mismatch and its implications way back in 1991, when Bernard Levin, the Times columnist, and he one day excoriated Christians for bleating his word so much about persecution. Everyone knew the only people really persecuted for their faith since Roman times were the Jews. He actually wrote. He wrote this extraordinary statement at the end of a century that had seen more Christians massacred for their faith around the globe than all the previous 19 centuries put together. Levin's blind spot was indicative, to my mind, of a far deeper cultural flaw, and that's what I set out to do something about. It has taken 25 years for the story of Christian persecution fully to break, and many, many more have died in that time. Christian persecution is like the canary in the mine shaft when it is about to collapse, so it has been said. It is a sign we need to heed. We do not have another 25 years for religious literacy to take hold, to break. The world is in grave danger from the West's own conceits and complacency. What people believe matters in realpolitik, and this film addresses the media's role in that. You really heard it from the horse's mouth there. We are not equipping our young journalists, as said by the former news editor of the Press Association. So I'm now just going to take you to northern Uganda to tell you a story about the genesis of this religious literacy charity. It's a story about a campaign to end the terror of the Lord's Resistance Army that had held sway there for 18 years when I was sent up there. The LRA was and still is led by a schizophrenic gangster called Joseph Kony, who blends a unique mix of spirit worship with psychotic hallucinations and traditional power generation in a context of lawlessness and revenge. And I wish I had a whole lecture to unpack each element of that, but it was by understanding each element of that that we were able to help address what had gone so badly wrong. For 18 years, the whole of the Acholi nation was cowed and terrorized by this man, and 25,000 children had disappeared, kidnapped and enslaved, only half ever returned, often minus their lips or their noses. There were very few media reports about this and almost no academic research whatsoever. Despite contributing 50% of its national income in aid, the British government regarded itself as having no material interest there, and the world turned away. Yet, that war is over today in Uganda. It was ended by what began as the mobilization of religious sentiment. 400 British churches alone got behind a 2-year campaign to end it. Not just praying and not just having jumble sales, but actually hassling their MPs and going to this very deadly part of the world. The research was done, the relationships were established, the media were mobilized, Lindsay Hilsum covered the launch of that campaign, the international agencies recovered a sense of purpose up there. As a result, aid was tripled to the area, the UN opened 3 offices up there, business, which was completely absent, began flowing back, and best of all, the IDP camps of 1.5 million people emptied completely. And I quote the Foreign Minister, Chris Mullin's aide, who said to me, the Break the Silence campaign, run by the Church Mission Society, and representatives of that society are here today, greatly increased political activity as a result. And it began with the churches. I tell this as a case study of religious literacy at work, of money wasted and innocent lives lost on a profligate scale until the research was done into what really motivated the people, what really caused the fear that locked them down. The church is the primary agent of change for the better in the world. There is no other. Sociologists will tell you. That's because they have what's called an ethic of care and universal networks that cut horizontally and vertically. They get the fact that people are motivated by their allegiances, as we heard from Simon Sharma, a great discovery to him, and those allegiances are spiritually anchored. They have to do with love and fear and meaning. After our media campaign, Jan Egeland, then humanitarian rapporteur for the United Nations Human Rights Council, held a press conference in Kampala in which he said this situation was worse than Iraq. That was after shock and awe. The strength of the popular campaign gave a stronger mandate to the relevant political channels to task the International Criminal Court with making the LRA its test case. Sadly, Kony lives on in Central African Republic, where he continues his depredations. Jonathan Powell, then Tony Blair's chief of staff, told a Westminster gathering recently that the LRA were routed from Uganda because of the ICC. Yet if that were all it was, why has he not been routed from the Central African Republic? He is, I assume, a secularist, even though secularism has been proven over and over again to be a religion without clout. He doesn't understand how the churches work. It's not just a matter of opinion. Religion is what your beliefs do. So I was puzzled, to say the least, to learn just 2 weeks ago that a senior religion correspondent was told to leave out the word Christian when reporting from northern Iraq. When Indira Gandhi was assassinated in Delhi, the reason was not that she had ordered the raid on the Golden Temple, holiest of holies for the Sikh religion, but because of her blind attachment to her own faith, political secularism. She put so much trust in it against all the evidence of common sense that she refused to take the precaution of changing her Sikh bodyguards, who then shot her. It is the same with our government today. We are putting our faith in political secularism when all the evidence shows it gives no protection whatsoever against what threatens the nation. For that reason, I turn now to matters nearer home. Eric Pickles is Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. In February, he has a decision to make on whether Europe's biggest Islamic training centre and mosque, catering for 9,500 people in Newham, should be allowed to be built. It's being built by a group with such an unpronounceable name, Tablighi Jamaat, that no one knows about it. Decisions about this mosque have been deferred or taken to appeal again and again since the 1990s, while the group remained off and on for long periods during that time, illegally in situ. Tablighi Jamaat, or TJ, which means the preaching party, are the Islamic reinforcers, neo-fundamentalists, espousing a very particular fundamentalist Islam, going back to the beginning. The Muslim commentator Ziauddin Sadar has called their methodology cult-like. They teach the repetition of certain epithets, disorientation through the shunning of outside influences and wider society, and bonding through small platoon experiences on their preaching parties. They are the biggest group of Islamic proselytizers in the world, 80 million, it's claimed. Other Muslims call them antisocial, supremacist, and sexist. They create enclaves around them by default. They are taught literally to hate the world. Their women are forced to wear what they call black sheets and are not allowed out except accompanied by a man. Despite a wealth of research by Muslim and non-Muslim scholars on the ambitions of this group to make London its world centre, there has been almost no media coverage whatsoever. Muslims who oppose this development are intimidated. I know, because I had to stand in for one of them at the appeal hearing in Docklands this summer. Will Eric Pickles do the right thing? How will we know? The electorate, the public at large, may never be told. For to criticize any aberrant form of Islam, no matter how antisocial, is deemed Islamophobic, especially, I'm told, by the BBC. London may find itself the world centre of the most effective producer of hostile Islamic enclaves there is, and no one will know or understand the implications of that for years. So, drilling now down to the issue of the day, jihadism. High Wycombe's producing some of the nastiest jihadis in the world. A fifth man was arrested just 2 weeks ago. I was told that by the MP. That did not make it into the papers. One of them plotted the destruction of 4 airliners, because of which the whole world now has to have its face lotions screened at airports. One witnessed the beheading of US journalist James Foley, then boasted of it on Twitter. He'd been a shelf stacker at High Wycombe's Morrison's supermarket. Yet when I asked the overworked MP for this little town what his priorities were, he told me the hospital and then the economy. Although the big issues of the day are religious, our representatives are still preoccupied with the mainstream agenda. So who's going to speak up? Government has yet to learn the instincts and the language appropriate to the challenges and dilemmas of globalization. Finally, I want just to quote a little bit of a speech made by Professor Saeed Hossein Nasr. He's the professor of Islamic Studies at Georgetown University in Washington. And he made a speech at the inauguration of the King Fahd Chair of Islamic Studies at London University in the presence of the Bishop of London, Richard Charters, and I was there. And he said this in relation to Muslim youth today, and he said this a while ago, I've never forgotten it, and I do think that we have to take this seriously. He said, I don't think many Western scholars really appreciate what is going on in Muslim students' minds, in which all he holds sacred is desecrated and torn apart in the name of rational process. Religious people mind this stuff. It's a major psychological problem, he added. Western civilization was, he said, like a cup drained of religious faith. Yet this secular West still claimed global authority in the way the Christian paradigm it had replaced had done before it. This, he said to an audience at SOAS, was a claim without legitimacy. 1 billion Muslims could not identify themselves with its basic irreligious premise. I don't believe in the global village, he said. It was foisted on the Islamic world. That paradigm, which replaced the Christian paradigm, cannot be global. And he used the expression titanic battle being waged between the only religion that was now a match for secularism, and that was Islam. This, I suggest, explains some of the appeal of the caliphate to bored suburban youth. If we don't see this in religious terms and take those terms at face value, we cannot begin to grasp the problems that face us. So, with your indulgence, I will put up before you some practical things that can be done for those who mediate the nation's conversation with itself. I suggest that every newsroom retain at least one religion specialist, or there needs to be a subscription to a specialist organisation who can help, and I would suggest like Lapido Media, naturally. That short courses be tailored to the needs of newsrooms on political religion. That an integral element in all media training courses should be world religions and religious sociology, but perhaps more understanding the religious sensibility, not so much the phenomena of religion, which can be a cop-out. Link-ups between media courses such as those run by Lincoln University teaching conflict reporting could be established with nearby theological colleges. There could be some cross-pollination like that. There should be access to relevant resources on religious literacy and world affairs. And above all, perhaps, that doctoral research be done into epistemology and journalism. How does a journalist know what to report and whom to believe in reporting stories with a religion dimension? I would like to see personally an Institute of Religious Literacy and World Affairs to lead these changes. I believe that somebody has got to take this on board, and naturally that will need funding. You will have a chance later this afternoon to make your own suggestions and pitch in your own ideas for funding for leadership and new cross-cutting initiatives that will end the incoherence in our discourse, incoherence that, as Bishop Angelos so authoritatively said, is costing lives, debilitating nations, and mocking the seriousness of all that is at stake as we give up and go shopping. Together we can change this. Thank you very much.